Depending on how you see it, the film Perfect Days by film vendors is something of an anomaly in today's cinema. Or it's exactly what cinema is all about and a much needed remedy for today's cinema. In either case, the film pretty much offers no plot, no goal to be achieved, no danger to be stopped, no lost item to be retrieved, and no contest to be won. It's just about a man who lives a rather ascetic life and living in one of the most wondrous and difficult cities to live in for anyone on the planet. Is it because of this, or despite this, that the new film by Wim Wenders, Perfect Days, is a perfect movie? What does a perfect movie even mean? If a perfect movie is all about how it makes you feel at the end of it, or if the movie has transformed your perception of the world and of yourself, then Perfect Days is, to quote the late great Kurt Hennig, absolutely perfect. That being said, who is the man portrayed in the film, and what is the city he lives in? The name of the man is Hirayama, and he is played by Koji Yakusho, who won the Cannes Best Actor Award in 2023 for his leading role in Perfect Days. The character he plays cleans public toilets for a living, is middle-aged, lives alone, and lives a routine life. He wakes up, waters his plants, gets ready for work, goes to work, takes black and white photographs of trees during his lunchtime, rides his bicycle, goes to a public bath, reads books, and listens to music originally released on LP and cassettes. That's pretty much what happens in the film. Where then does all of this happen? Hirayama makes his residence in the largest city in the world, Tokyo, which is where I live too. It's set in modern times, and the toilets he cleans are part of a project in Tokyo to reimagine the architecture of public toilets. The designs are a mix of futuristic, traditional, industrial, and natural, one-of-a-kind imaginings which help to give the film part of its fun in an otherwise slow-paced yet relaxing film. Because each of these toilets has its own fascinating character and design that could make you think, I'd like to check that out. Check the link in the description for more information, and if you'd like me to do a video on these unique toilets in Tokyo, please let me know in the comments section below. So, as a film with no plot and no central conflict to be resolved, how does Perfect Days still manage to be a more memorable and enjoyable film than almost any film coming out in recent times with big budgets and state-of-the-art special effects? I think there's three things that the film does to make Perfect Days such a great film, especially one to be viewed inside a movie theater. Those three things are: 1. How the film is structured, 2. The possible metaphor that the film utilizes, and 3. Its main character, Hirayama, and how he and the people in his life illustrate certain Buddhist understandings of the mind. First, let's talk about the unique structure of the film Perfect Days. The structure of the film could be seen as having three main sections. I'm not sure if we could consider the film as utilizing a three-act structure to tell the story of the main character, Hirayama, because there is no rise, climax, and denouement where the main character comes out of changed or transformed. Instead, the sections show us the ebb and flow of Hirayama's daily life and how his routines are repeated during the week, then events, like those in the film, which are not so uncommon and could happen to any of us anywhere, causes interruptions in the ebb and flow of Hirayama's daily routine. The three sections of Perfect Days, in simple terms then, could be thought of as follows. The first section shows us Hirayama's work day. The second section is about Hirayama and what he does on his day off. And the third section is how his work day and day off become entangled by the comings and goings of people in his life, who consist primarily of the people he works with, the people he is related to, and the people who work at the places he frequents during his days off or after his work is done for the day. On paper, this structure for the story may not be overflowing with drama, but what this film does do is to establish Hirayama's routine life first, so that the sudden appearances of other people that appear later on and throughout the story provide two possible things for the story. On the one hand, they can offer a break from the monotony of his routines by injecting sudden unexpected situations that challenge Hirayama to adapt to before he returns to his routine. And on the other hand, the interruptions actually show how different each day is for Hirayama, even though it appears that he is doing the same thing as if en route in a regular routine. For example, sudden events such as a little boy hiding in one of the toilets, whom Hirayama helps to reunite the little boy with his mother, as well as smaller incidents like finding a piece of paper left in one of the toilets with a tic-tac-toe grid that he was going to throw out, but then decides to keep and play along with, which then leaves us wondering who will win this game as it continues throughout the film. Now let's take a closer look at the other sections one by one. So where the first section of the film shows us the routine of Hirayama's workday and professional life, the second section is about what Hirayama does on his day off. The second section is bracketed by Hirayama opening his eyes in the morning after a night's sleep, then ending with him closing his eyes listening to live music in the small bar run by a middle-aged woman he visits on his days off. In between these bracketing events, we watch Hirayama ride his bicycle around Tokyo, do his laundry, buy used books, pick up photographs at a small camera shop where he takes his rolls of film to be developed, and have a drink at a local bar across the coin laundry he uses to wash his clothes. If you want some tips on how to do some housekeeping in Japan, and also have an idea of what you might expect as you grow older, then this second section of the film will present a handy reference and a somewhat accurate example of the issues an aging society like Japan faces, which is increasingly being shared in many, if not all, developed nations, that you too might face yourself someday. We enter then the third section of the film where elements of his workday and day off become entangled by the comings and goings of people in his life. What I mean is that issues outside of the workplace finds its way in like his co-workers' love life, becomes part of one workday, and his niece's familial disputes becomes part of his workday and his day off as well. The third section gives us the most information, or rather offers us the most hints about Hirayama's past. This is the section of the film where his niece visits him after running away from home. Unlike his young co-worker who questioned why Hirayama devotes himself to his job of cleaning public toilets, Hirayama's young niece is more interested in how he does his job rather than why. Where Hirayama's co-worker comes across as condescending towards Hirayama's choices in life, the young niece is more curious and eager to learn from him. In their own unique way, both of the young characters seek some form of guidance from Hirayama that they could take with them towards their own futures, respectively, to which they both bear uncertainty and anxiety. Consisting primarily of different characters coming and going, the significance of these interruptions in Hirayama's routines, we could have a look into a possible metaphor the film uses from a Japanese term called Komorebi. At the end of the film, Perfect Days, right after the end credits finish, a Japanese word fills the screen, which is simply a beautiful word and is at the heart of the film Perfect Days, Komorebi. The Japanese term Komorebi doesn't yet have an equivalent word in English for explaining not just the natural phenomenon of Komorebi, but also the deeper spiritual implications of the experience of Komorebi. Roughly translated in English, Komorebi refers to the moment sunlight filters to the leaves of trees. Whether or not that filtering of the sun by trees, where we can catch the glint of sunlight shining through the moving branches and leaves in front of it, has medicinal effects may be a stretch to argue for or against. However, I wonder if Komorebi was what the Buddha Siddhartha experienced when sitting under the Bodhi tree many, many centuries ago. If so, then rather than thinking of the sunlight as shining through, the experience of Komorebi could be felt more like breaking through, and all the while doing so without destroying anything in its path. Komorebi could then be a metaphor for that latent state of being like Komorebi that I believe many of us, if not all of us, would like to ultimately realize about our own true selves as we face the various challenges and difficulties of life. To understand, then, how the different people that come and go in the film during Hirayama's work days and holidays is to consider that these parts of the story as a kind of Komorebi. In other words, people and events throughout the film are like the leaves of trees, and Hirayama's daily routine, gentleness, and efficiency of responses are like the sun we see through the filter of the leaves. So now, after looking at the structure of the film and the metaphor that brings meaning to the character interactions, let's talk about the character of Hirayama as illustrating concepts of the mind in Buddhist terms. Something like this could possibly have not been done better than in a country, for the most part, that practices Buddhist concepts all the while living in a modern, fast-paced environment like the country of Japan. The basic structure of the film on the surface isn't rife with conflict that could keep us guessing and anticipating what could happen next. There is still conflict in Perfect Days, though subtle, throughout the story, but in a form that is a departure from most Western films where conflict arises from some type of competition or goal-focused pursuit for change. Instead, the conflict in Perfect Days is about keeping oneself from being affected and changed from not just the fears and projections of the outside world, but projections and illusions of the mind. The various characters in Perfect Days display the glitches of the mind, while Hirayama offers an example of how not to be enslaved by it, which has its basis in Buddhist understanding. Most of the characters in the film tend to speak of things rooted in the past or their anxieties of the future. For example, Hirayama's co-worker keeps questioning Hirayama for why he still devotes himself to cleaning public toilets, thinking about how the toilets will get dirty again later on at some time in the future. As well, in the final scene as co-workers, we hear Hirayama's co-worker speak during a telephone conversation of the co-worker informing Hirayama that he has decided to quit because his life isn't panning out the way he had hoped it would, and then promises Hirayama that he will pay him back the money he lent him at some time in the future. Furthermore, this character has a habit of ranking people or situations according to a scale of 1 to 10, further exhibiting one of the slippery slopes of the mind, wanting to compare and quantify things. This comparative mind that Buddhists try to keep themselves from being controlled by is in contrast with Hirayama's ability to not compare things, as he showed during the scenes with his niece, who asks him questions about one's place in the world. However, she does later compare herself with a character in one of the books Hirayama has in his personal library at home, as in the trailer for the film where Hirayama tells his niece, "Next time is next time, now is now." Hirayama shows one of the methods of not identifying with the mind and not to be controlled by it in Buddhist practices, and that is to be fully present in the present moment. This conversation between Hirayama and his niece concludes in the film with them riding their bicycles on a bridge crossing the Sumida River in Tokyo, chanting the words, "Next time is next time, now is now," like their own personal mantra. I think the conflict primarily in Perfect Days is about the functioning of the mind as both protector and preventer of not only our survival, but our well-being. There is nothing more conflicting and conflicted than the mind, so much so that in a Buddhist understanding of the mind, its inherent functioning and nature is for conflict and chaos. Buddhists have meditation as a way to not identify with the mind and go beyond it rather than to try and force the mind to become some sort of idea, state like a strong mind or a clever mind. Mind is chaos, no matter what kind it is. This might sound all too poetic and too subjective to be an opinion shared by you and me, but take my word for it, Perfect Days is one of the finest films ever made. If not, then at least in recent times. I wonder, after saying all of this, if there is another type of framework that writers can include in their toolbox to help them unleash their stories. Maybe something like this film Perfect Days, where we take a look at the work routines of characters in one section, then look at what the character does in their free time in another section, and then combine the two together. Maybe we can all call this type of framework Komorebi. I think Komorebi can be a metaphor for the comings and goings of people throughout our lives. In the moment, these moments might be painful, but when we're quiet and still, like Hirayama, these moments can glitter like sunlight filtered through the leaves of trees. Thank you very much for your time. If you have seen the film Perfect Days, please let me know in the comments what you thought, whether you liked it or not. And if you haven't seen the film, please, please, please make some time to see this wonderful movie by Wim Wenders, Perfect Days. Thank you for visiting the right table. I wish you all the best. Have a great day.